The kingdom of Yeimar stood in the heart of a vast and fertile land, its towering castles rising above lush forests and winding rivers. It was a land known for its ancient traditions, where royalty was revered as divine and its word was law. The people were loyal to their king and queen, the regal family holding sway over every aspect of life. The royal palace, sitting high on the cliffs that overlooked the capital, was a grand structure of marble and gold, filled with echoes of centuries of noble rule. Prince Ayan, the only son of King Olumide and Queen Adebisi, had always known that he would one day rule this vast kingdom. As a young man, he was everything that a future king should be: handsome, intelligent, and charismatic. His every movement was watched, his every word weighed, for it was said that his fate was tied not just to the kingdom, but to the very fabric of the land itself. Yet despite his outwardly perfect life, a deep emptiness gnawed at him, a feeling of being trapped in a golden cage. He was adored by his people, admired by his courtiers, yet none of them truly knew him. His heart was empty, his soul restless, and he longed for something more than the political responsibilities that weighed heavily upon him. Ayan's mind often drifted to thoughts of love, true love, not the alliances and political marriages arranged by his parents to secure power and stability for the kingdom. But love, it seemed, was as elusive as the wind, always just out of reach. Raba, the princess of Yeimar, led a life far different from that of Prince Ayan, though both were born into privilege. She lived in a smaller palace within the royal grounds, one that seemed far less majestic than the grandeur of her father's residence. Raba was not a stranger to beauty, yet it had little meaning to her, for behind her striking features and graceful demeanor lay a woman trapped by circumstances she could not control. Her mother, the late Queen Meroa, had been her guiding light, teaching her about kindness, wisdom, and the love that could only come from a true and gentle heart. But her mother's death had shattered Raba's world, and from that moment on, her life had belonged not to herself, but to her stepmother, Lady Farah. Lady Farah, a woman of sharp ambition and cold ambition, had swept into Raba's life with a smile that hid a heart as hard as stone. She had no interest in being a loving mother to Raba, no desire to care for her stepdaughter as her own. Instead, Lady Farah sought to control her every action, using her power over Raba as a means to further her own social standing and position in the kingdom. The delicate, warm bond that Raba had shared with her real mother was replaced by a suffocating dominance that coloured every aspect of her life. She could never be herself in Lady Farah's eyes, never allowed to follow her heart's wishes. Every dream that Raba once held dear was now suffocated by the rigid, unyielding rules set by her stepmother. She longed for freedom, for a life where she could breathe again, but Lady Farah's hold on her was tight and unrelenting. Raba's thoughts often drifted back to her mother, remembering the quiet moments they shared before her death, when her mother would tell her stories of the future and the promise of destiny. It was her mother who had spoken of the prophecy, the one that hinted at a union between Raba and a man who would change the course of their kingdom's future. Yet Raba, so often lost in her stepmother's oppressive grip, had never truly believed it. How could she? A life that seemed destined for power and wealth felt like a prison, not a dream. Prince Ayan's life, too, was shaped by prophecy, though he knew little of it. The royal elders had often spoken of a curse that would fall upon the kingdom if Ayan failed to fulfill his destiny. It was a curse not of death or destruction, but of emptiness, a kingdom that would never know peace or joy until its prince found his true match. The elders, with their cryptic words, had always spoken of this woman, though none of them had been able to see her clearly. The whispers had persisted in the palace halls. Ayan's fate is tied to a woman of noble blood, one who will change the course of Yeimar forever. But who this woman was, and how she would play a role in the kingdom's future, remained unknown. As Ayan grew older, The weight of his future seemed to press upon him more and more. Every royal banquet, every political negotiation, every smile he gave to his people felt like a performance. Behind the regal smile was a man who had never truly connected with anyone. His friends were merely courtiers vying for influence, and his family, though loving, was often distant in the way royal families sometimes are. Ayan, despite all his wealth and privilege, felt alone. He had never known what it was like to love and be loved in return. Dreams were nothing more than fleeting illusions. Lady Farah had made it clear that there was no room for rebellion in the palace. Raba was to be obedient, to marry Lord Balogan, and to never question her stepmother's will. But Raba's heart told a different story. Deep inside, she longed for love, real love, not the cold, political union that Lady Farah was trying to force upon her. She had seen Ayan from a distance, and despite the silence between them, she felt a connection that she could not deny. She'd always been told that her heart would belong to a man who would change the fate of the kingdom, and though she had doubted the prophecy, she felt something stir within her when she thought of him. But how could she ever reach him? How could she ever show him the truth when every step she took was watched? Every word she spoke twisted by Lady Farah's manipulations. Raba's struggle was one of the soul, torn between the world her stepmother had created for her and the world she longed to create for herself. Every day, she put on the mask of indifference, hiding the pain and longing that festered beneath. She smiled when Lady Farah told her to, nodded when it was required, and wore the cold façade of someone who had already given her heart away. But in the silence of her chambers, when no one was watching, she cried. She cried for the life she had lost, for the dreams that had been crushed by Lady Farah's cruelty. And most of all, she cried for the love she could never have, the love that she could never express, trapped in a prison of duty and deceit. The pain of living a lie became almost unbearable. Raba's heart ached with each passing day, knowing that the man she truly wanted to be with was being kept away from her by her stepmother's lies. She wondered if Ayan even knew the truth, if he had heard the whispers that Lady Farah had planted in the court. She wondered if he thought of her as the cold, uninterested woman the rumours had described, or if he could somehow sense the depth of her true feelings. As the days wore on, the weight of Lady Farah's plot grew heavier. Raba's hope dwindled with each passing moment, and she began to wonder if she would ever have the strength to defy her stepmother. Would she be able to break free from the chains that bound her? Would she ever be able to tell Ayan the truth? To show him that her heart had always been his? For now, though, Raba was trapped in a world of lies, her future decided by the whims of a cruel woman who cared nothing for her happiness. And as Lady Farah's plans continued to unfold, the princess's fate seemed all but sealed. The royal palace of Yeimar was a place where history and grandeur intertwined at every turn. Its sprawling halls echoed with the footsteps of dignitaries, courtiers, and noble families, all coming together for the grand events that marked the passing of seasons in the kingdom. A series of royal gatherings had been scheduled to celebrate the approaching festival of renewal, a tradition in which the royal family showcased the splendor of the kingdom and reaffirmed their bonds with the people. The festival was the perfect backdrop for Prince Ayan to make his first public appearance of the season. And it was here, amidst the noise and festivities, that fate would finally bring him face to face with Raba. Ayan had attended many royal events, each one a mixture of political necessity and personal obligation. His every move was scrutinized, every word examined for its implications. But today, as he walked through the opulent hall of the palace, he felt something stir in him that he could not ignore. There was a palpable energy in the air, a mixture of excitement and tension, but nothing could compare to the strange pull he felt as he laid eyes on Raba for the first time. She was standing by the grand tapestry, her back straight, her posture regal. Her features were sharp, yet delicate, her eyes a calm reflection of the grandeur that surrounded her. Despite the crowd of nobles and foreign dignitaries, she seemed almost isolated in her stillness, as if untouched by the buzz of the gathering. Rabea's gaze, though distant, seemed to momentarily flicker in his direction, and for a brief second, their eyes met. Ayan's heart skipped a beat. There was something magnetic about her, something that transcended the royal mask she wore. Rabea's beauty was undeniable, but it wasn't her outward appearance that drew Ayan in. It was the way she held herself, as though she were trapped in a world she did not belong to, like a bird that longed to take flight but was tethered by invisible chains. Rabea, on the other hand, felt a jolt of recognition when their eyes met. But the connection was not one of familiarity. No, it was something deeper, something she couldn't quite explain. She had heard rumors of the prince, of course. Everyone in the kingdom had. Ayan was the future of Yeimar, destined for greatness, admired by all. But it wasn't his status that held Rabea's attention. No, it was the intense, probing look he gave her that unsettled her. She quickly averted her gaze, forcing herself to focus on the gathering around her, to distract herself from the unbidden feelings that were rising inside her. She knew better than to allow herself to feel anything for him. Her loyalty to Lady Farah, her stepmother, was paramount. Lady Farah had orchestrated her life in a way that kept her tethered to the kingdom's political games, and Rabea's future was already decided. The union with Lord Balogun was meant to secure their position and ensure that Lady Farah's influence continued to grow. She had been raised to serve the kingdom, to be a dutiful daughter, even if it meant sacrificing her own happiness. Yet, in this moment, faced with Prince Ayan's gaze, a small part of her questioned the life that had been written for her. Ayan, sensing the coolness in her demeanor, felt a mix of intrigue and frustration. There was something about Rabea that was different from the women he had known. She wasn't fawning over him like the others, wasn't eager to be noticed. In fact, it almost seemed as if she was trying to avoid him. The more distant she became, the more Ayan wanted to know her. The prince had been raised to expect admiration from everyone he met. But with Rabea, there was only resistance. And that, in a strange way, only intensified his curiosity. Despite her best efforts to remain detached, Rabea could not ignore the feelings of attraction that stirred inside her. She had spent years building a wall around her emotions, a defense against the manipulative world her stepmother had trapped her in. But here, in this brief encounter, it all seemed to crumble. Rabea couldn't let herself fall into this dangerous allure, not with everything at stake. Not when her stepmother's plans were so intricately woven around her. Lady Farah, ever watchful, noticed the moment between Ayan and Rabea. She could see the spark of recognition, the flicker of something unspoken between them, and it enraged her. She had worked too hard to secure Rabea's future with Lord Balogun, and this was a threat she could not afford to ignore. She had to ensure that the prince was kept away from her stepdaughter, that their destinies remained separate. In the coming days, Lady Farah's presence around Rabea became even more pronounced. She pushed her stepdaughter into the arms of Lord Balogun with increasing force, ensuring that every royal gathering was an opportunity to solidify the engagement. She was careful to limit Rabea's time with Ayan, often steering her away from him at social events and directing her focus onto her future husband. The whispers in the court about Rabea's aloofness were carefully managed, as Lady Farah worked behind the scenes to maintain her control over the narrative. As Ayan continued his duties at the palace, he became more and more intrigued by Rabea. He could sense that there was something more to her coldness than met the eye. He began to ask questions about her upbringing, her behavior, her interactions with Lady Farah. And the more he learned, the more he realized that the version of Rabea he had been fed was not the whole truth. There were contradictions in the stories. Some courtiers spoke of her kindness and wisdom, while others described her as distant and uninterested in the affairs of the kingdom. It didn't make sense. Ayan's suspicion grew, and he began to piece together the mystery of Rabea's life. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was being hidden from him. Something about her relationship with Lady Farah. Something about the prophecy that seemed to be tied to her. The more he saw her, the more he felt that there was a deeper story behind her icy exterior. He was drawn to her, yes. But more than that, he was drawn to the puzzle that surrounded her. Raba, for her part, was caught in a tug-of-war between her growing feelings for the prince and her obligation to her stepmother's wishes. She knew that the path she was being forced to walk was not of her choosing, but how could she break free from it? She was just one person, powerless in the face of Lady Farah's control. The more time passed, the more she realized that the life she had been living was an illusion, built on lies and manipulation. But was she strong enough to break free? And if she did, what would become of her? For now, she kept her distance, hiding the truth of her emotions behind a carefully constructed façade. But in the depths of her heart, she couldn't deny what was growing between her and Ayaan. And that, perhaps, was the most dangerous part of it all. The air in the royal palace felt thick with secrets, and Prince Ayaan could no longer ignore the feeling gnawing at him. The more he observed Raba, the more he began to question everything he had been told about her. There was something unsettling about her, yes, but it wasn't in the way people had described. It wasn't in her coldness or aloofness. It was in the walls she had built around herself, the guarded expression that never seemed to fade, no matter who she was with. He could see the pain in her eyes, a quiet sorrow that contradicted the image of the perfect princess he had been taught to believe in. Determined to uncover the truth, Ayaan began his investigation in the most discreet way possible. He sought out the servants who worked in the palace, those who had seen the inner workings of Lady Farah's manipulations. He spoke to the gardeners, the cooks, the palace guards, people who had little to lose and everything to gain by speaking the truth. What they revealed only deepened his suspicions. Lady Farah is not the woman she appears to be, one of the older servants, a woman named Zara, whispered one evening as Ayaan passed through the kitchens. She's been controlling Raba since the day the girl's mother passed away. We all know it, Your Highness, but we're afraid to speak. Her cruelty is masked by her charm. Ayaan's brow furrowed as he listened. He had heard rumors of Lady Farah's coldness, but he had never imagined that her manipulations ran this deep. He pressed further, asking about the rumored arranged marriage, the one that would bind Raba to an old nobleman against her will. She's been promised to Lord Balogun, Zara continued in a hushed tone. Lady Farah plans to marry her off, regardless of the girl's wishes. But it's not just the marriage. There's something darker at play here, something to do with the curse of Raba's bloodline. No one knows the full truth, but the rumors say that her fate is bound to a prophecy, a curse that Lady Farah is determined to control. Ayaan's mind raced as he pieced the fragments together. There was so much more to Raba's story than he had been told. He had to confront Lady Farah, to get the answers he needed, answers that could change everything. The confrontation with Lady Farah took place in the privacy of the royal gardens, far from the prying eyes of the court. Ayaan approached her with the calm, authoritative demeanor he had learned to adopt in the face of difficult conversations. But there was an undercurrent of tension in the air, as if both parties knew the weight of what was about to unfold. Lady Farah, Ayaan began, his voice steady. I've been hearing rumors. Rumors about your plans for Raba, about the arrangements you've made for her future. I need to hear the truth from you. Lady Farah's smile remained unshaken, though her eyes narrowed slightly. She had been prepared for this moment, and her charm was as sharp as ever. My prince, I assure you, you've been misinformed. I have always done what is best for Raba. She is my responsibility, and I will protect her future. Our family's legacy is tied to her marriage, and Lord Balogun is a man of wealth and influence. It is the best course of action for all involved. Ayaan's gaze hardened. What about her wishes? Does her happiness not matter in all of this? At the mention of Raba's happiness, Lady Farah's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. Rabea is a princess. She will learn to accept her destiny, just as all who come before her have. It's for the good of the kingdom. Ayan didn't buy it. There was something in Lady Farah's voice, an underlying cruelty that he had never noticed before. He could feel the lies she spun around her words, but there was no way to prove it. Not yet. He turned on his heel and left the garden, his mind swirling with unanswered questions. His suspicion only grew, and he knew that there was something more to the curse surrounding Rabea's bloodline. Something darker. But Lady Farah had made it clear that she would stop at nothing to protect her plans, and Ayan realized that he couldn't go to her for the truth. He would have to find it on his own. Rabea, meanwhile, was struggling with her own emotions. She had heard whispers of Ayan's investigation, of his growing interest in her life. At first she felt a pang of betrayal. Was he only curious about her because of some royal intrigue? Or was it something more? She didn't know if she could trust him, especially given how deeply her life had been entangled in Lady Farah's web of lies. But as she saw Ayan from a distance, something inside her softened. There was a sincerity in his eyes, a depth that she hadn't expected. He wasn't like the other nobles who fawned over her. His concerns seemed real. One evening, as the moonlight filtered through the palace windows, Rabea found herself standing in the garden, lost in thought. The cool breeze lifted her hair as she gazed out over the palace grounds, her mind spinning with uncertainty. She had always been taught to be cautious, to guard her heart and mind from the dangers of royal politics. But Ayan's presence had made her feel something different, a warmth, a pull that she couldn't ignore. It was then that Ayan appeared, stepping into the garden with quiet resolve. He had been searching for her, and when he saw her standing alone, he knew it was time to speak to her. "Rabea," he said softly, his voice a mixture of hesitation and sincerity. "I need to know the truth. About your life. About Lady Farah. I've been asking questions, and I can't ignore what I've learned." Rabea froze, her heart racing. She had been preparing herself for this moment, but now that it had arrived, she was unsure of how to respond. Could she trust him? Could she tell him the truth? "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I never wanted you to find out this way. But you're right. I can't keep hiding from you, from the truth." For the first time, Rabea allowed herself to open up, to speak about the cruelty she had endured at Lady Farah's hands. She spoke of the isolation, the manipulation, and the way her dreams of freedom had been crushed under the weight of her stepmother's schemes. As she spoke, Ayan listened intently, his eyes filled with sympathy and concern. "I'm not like Lady Farah," Rabea continued, her voice shaking. "I never agreed to this life, but it's all I've known. And now I'm afraid of what will happen if I defy her. What will happen to me, to my family?" Ayan took a step closer, reaching out to gently grasp her hand. "Rabea, you don't have to do this alone. I'll help you. I'll protect you." And in that moment, a connection bloomed between them, one built on truth, vulnerability, and the promise of something greater. Their bond, though fragile, began to take root, and Rabea felt a flicker of hope stir within her heart. Could it be that Ayan's feelings for her were real? Could he truly offer her the freedom she so desperately craved? The lies that had once bound them began to unravel, thread by thread, and in the space between their shared moments, Rabea realized that her future no longer had to be dictated by Lady Farah. It could be something more, something of her own choosing. As the sun dipped behind the palace walls, casting long shadows over the royal court, the tension in the air was palpable. The time had come for the truth to finally emerge, and it was in the heart of the grand hall that the confrontation would take place. Olanrewaju and Kemia stood side by side, their resolve unwavering. The court was packed with nobles, advisors, and courtiers, all eager to witness the unraveling of the kingdom's most scandalous secrets. At the center of it all stood Adesewa, her regal posture faltering for the first time in years. Olanrewaju's voice rang out across the room, loud and clear. "The time for lies is over, Lady Adesewa. The truth must be told." His words hung in the air, and for a moment it felt as though the entire kingdom was holding its breath. Adesewa's sharp gaze locked onto him, her eyes narrowing with barely concealed rage. She had never expected anyone, least of all Olanrewaju, to challenge her authority in front of the court. Her grip on the kingdom had always been strong, built on deceit and manipulation. But now, with every passing moment, that grip was slipping. Camilla stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear that churned in her stomach. "Olanrewaju is right. I know the truth about what you've done, Adesewa. You've kept me locked in this cage of lies, controlling my every move. The arranged marriage to Olumide, the lies about the prophecy. It's all been a scheme to keep me from my true future." A murmur of disbelief swept through the court as the nobles exchanged shocked glances. Adesewa's face twisted in fury as she took a step toward Camilla, her hand rising as if to strike. But she hesitated when she saw the resolute defiance in her stepdaughter's eyes. "Lies?" Adesewa sneered, her voice dripping with venom. "You think you know the truth, Camilla? You are nothing without me. Without my guidance, you would be lost in the world." But Camilla wasn't afraid anymore. She had spent years under Adesewa's thumb, suffocating in the false promises of a future that never belonged to her. Now, with Olanrewaju by her side, she felt a new strength surging within her. "The prophecy was never meant to bind me to you, Adesewa. It was never meant to be a tool for your power. The truth is that I am destined for something greater than the life you've planned for me." Adesewa's face turned pale, and for the first time, doubt flickered in her eyes. She tried to regain her composure, but it was clear that the control she once held over the court was beginning to crumble. The evidence was overwhelming. The whispers of the arranged marriage, the fake prophecies, the manipulation of her daughter's future. Everything was being laid bare before the kingdom. "Enough!" Adesewa's voice rose in a frantic crescendo, but it was too late. The truth had been exposed, and her carefully constructed lies could no longer hold up under the weight of scrutiny. Olanrewaju stepped forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "You've twisted the lives of everyone around you for your own gain, Adesewa. But your reign is over." Adesewa's mouth twisted into a snarl, but she could no longer hide her panic. "You think you've won, Olanrewaju? The court will never accept this. You're a fool if you think they will back you and Camilla." But the nobles were already whispering amongst themselves, their loyalty faltering as the truth took hold. Slowly, one by one, they began to side with Olanrewaju and Camilla. Adesewa's grip on the kingdom began to falter, and the weight of her lies became unbearable. Camilla turned to Olanrewaju, her heart racing as the weight of the moment settled on her shoulders. The battle for the future had just begun, and with her stepmother's power diminishing, the path to her own destiny was now within reach. But there was still one question that loomed over her. Would she choose to follow her heart and be with Olanrewaju, or would she continue to live under the shadow of Adesewa's manipulation? As the court waited for her answer, Camilla felt her pulse quicken. She had spent so long being controlled, following the path that had been laid out for her. But now, with the truth laid bare and the chance for freedom before her, she knew what she had to do. "I choose to live my own life," Camilla said firmly, her voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling inside her. "I choose to follow my heart, and my heart is with Olanrewaju." A wave of approval rippled through the court as the nobles began to speak in hushed tones, some nodding in agreement with Camilla's decision. Others, however, remained uncertain, their loyalty still divided. The battle for the throne had only just begun. Adesewa's face twisted in fury, but she knew that her control over the kingdom was slipping away. She had one final move to make, a desperate bid to regain her power. "This isn't over," she hissed, her voice filled with venom. "You may have won this battle, but the war is far from over." With that, she stormed out of the court, her steps echoing through the grand hall as she retreated into the shadows of her own downfall. The court was left in silence, the weight of the truth settling heavily over the kingdom. Olanrewaju and Yeimar stood together, their hands clasped tightly as they faced the uncertain future before them. The kingdom's fate, and their own, now rested in their hands. A battle for control of the throne loomed on the horizon, with factions forming around either Olanrewaju and Yeimar's fight for justice, or Adesewa's last desperate attempts to maintain her power. But whatever happened next, Olanrewaju knew one thing for certain. The future of the kingdom could no longer be built on lies. It would be built on truth, love, and the promise of a new beginning. And with Yeimar by his side, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The court was still buzzing with the aftermath of the dramatic confrontation, but the final act was yet to unfold. Olanrewaju stood before the kingdom's nobles, his gaze unwavering, his heart set on the decision that would reshape not only his life, but the future of the entire kingdom. He had been raised to understand the politics of power, the alliances, the backstabbing, the manipulations, but none of it mattered anymore. As his eyes met Yeimar's, standing beside him with a newfound strength and defiance, Olanrewaju knew that there was something far more precious than the throne, something far more powerful than the political games that had shaped his existence. It was love. It was truth. It was freedom. "I reject the alliances that were meant to bind me," Olanrewaju declared, his voice clear and resolute. "I choose Yeimar. I choose love, and I choose a future where truth reigns over deception." His words struck like a hammer, reverberating through the court. The nobles, who had once seen him as a mere puppet of the system, now watched as the prince forged his own path, one that was not dictated by power, but by the strength of his heart. Adesewa, who had once held the reins of the kingdom with an iron grip, now stood at the precipice of her downfall. The court had turned against her, the truth exposed for all to see. Her carefully woven web of lies had unraveled, and there was nowhere left for her to hide. The punishment was swift. Adesewa was exiled, her influence and power stripped away. She had been the mastermind behind the kingdom's suffering, but now she would fade into obscurity, her name a shadow of the past. The reign of deception had come to an end. As the court celebrated the victory of truth over tyranny, Yeimar stood tall, her heart soaring with newfound strength. For so long she'd been trapped in the chains of her stepmother's lies, forced to live a life that was not her own. But now, she was free. She was no longer a pawn in someone else's game. She was a powerful woman, with the right to shape her own future. Her eyes met Olanrewaju's, and a smile tugged at the corners of her lips. Together, they were unstoppable. They had not only defeated Adesewa's control over their lives, but they had also conquered the deeper forces that sought to keep them apart. Yeimar had learned to embrace her true self, no longer defined by the cruel woman who had raised her. She had become the woman she was always meant to be, a queen in her own right, with the strength to stand beside Olanrewaju as an equal. "I will help you, Olanrewaju," Yeimar said, her voice firm with conviction. "Together, we will restore balance to this kingdom and create a future where love, truth, and freedom reign." Olanrewaju nodded, his heart swelling with pride. "You are my equal in every way, Yeimar. Together we will build a kingdom where justice and peace prevail." And so, with the kingdom healed from the wounds of the past, Olanrewaju and Yeimar began their reign together. Their leadership was defined not by the cold, calculating politics that had once ruled the land, but by a deep sense of love, justice, and respect for one another. The people of the kingdom celebrated their new rulers, knowing that they had been saved from the darkness of the past and ushered into an era of hope and prosperity. But as the dust settled and the celebrations died down, a subtle unease lingered in the air. In the final moments of their triumph, Yeimar and Olanrewaju shared a quiet glance. There was something not quite right, a sense that the peace they had fought for might be fragile, that the shadows of the past might yet return to haunt them. As they stood side by side on the balcony of the palace, overlooking the kingdom they had saved, a figure in the distance caught their attention. A shadow moved through the crowd, too far to be identified, but close enough to send a chill down their spines. It was a fleeting moment, but it was enough to make them both pause, their instincts sharp. The future may be ours, but the battle is never truly over, Yeimar murmured, her eyes scanning the horizon. Olanrewaju nodded, his gaze hardening. We will face whatever comes together, Yeimar. The kingdom is ours to protect, and we will never let it fall into darkness again. The final twist was subtle, but its implications were clear. The kingdom had been saved, but the journey was far from over. The shadows of the past were never far, and new challenges would always arise. But for now, Olanrewaju and Yeimar stood united, ready to face whatever the future held, knowing that their love and their bond were stronger than anything that could come their way. And as the night stretched on, with the stars above shining brightly over the kingdom, the people slept peacefully, unaware of the quiet, unseen forces that might one day test their rulers. For now, the kingdom was safe, and the reign of love, truth, and freedom had begun. The end, or perhaps just the beginning.